And now we come to Martyn's really, really interesting contribution. So, with me, interesting is not a put down, which, that's kind of a joke in contemporary music. If somebody says your piece is, interesting, it means that they really haven't thought about it. But to me, looking at 165 scores over the next 8 weeks, interest is fundamental. It is paramount, right? The more a score interests me, the less it is like something else that I've seen. So, you obviously, if you were listening to the mock-up just now, you heard all of those lovely touches, the way that brass insinuates itself into the middle of each two-bar gesture here, and and then like the really intriguing way that things are scored, kind of going back and forth in terms of strength of texture. Not always completely working, in my opinion, which I'll talk about some of those things that maybe need a little bit stronger of an approach, but always with a lot of a lot of forethought and a lot of calculation. It's just really, really fun to watch. Okay, so a few things to watch out for. One is I was just in the previous evaluation talking about how it's a bit risky to tie a grace note, right? In other words, to have a grace note on the same pitch that it is tying to, because all you're doing is just having the note. The effect is that you're having the note start early, right? And then when you have the note start early, then it throws off everybody else in the orchestra in terms of the exact timing, right? And that can actually just pull things apart until everybody else gets the idea, and then still things are not quite as secure. So the approach that was taken in the previous evaluation of not tying, right? Just having, if you have to have B in there starting early, then it's better to have it as a separate note. And so instead of going, da da da, like that kind of thing, it more to go da 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 da. That is probably having two separately articulated notes. And I mean, look at it. You are accenting both notes, right? So it almost means that you must intend for this to be articulated somehow. In which case, you should delete the slur, delete the tie, right? So that we can really feel that da 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 da. Or you could just like forget about, just cut the B's and just leave the sort of sliding into it to this F double sharp, right? Sliding into the G sharp and all these other parts, because it doesn't really need it, right? I mean, you could even throw it in with like tambourine, shrum, 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 because it's really, that's what it's meant to evoke on piano. Okay, now let's talk about some of the evaluation criteria. Pitch weight in the upper middle register being sort of fixed in the piano part. You avoided that, which was great. The thematic material repeating often, sounding repetitive in its treatment, possibly. You avoided that as well. I mean, you have some similar elements, but you change around the treatment of the parts and everything else in a lot of ways, which I'll have a little bit more to comment right in here. So you solve that problem. The melodic development soaring kind of high in some of these. You solved that problem too, I felt, very nicely. Um, I, I think it's kind of cool the way you interrupted some of it. That was kind of fun. The accompaniment figures sort of crossing a very wide range. You solved that problem as well, I feel, pretty nicely. The upper middle register stuff, you just completely bypassed any kind of idea of transcription and did your own full full pitch scope kind of orchestration right in here, which was very nicely done. Maintaining a driving staccato going towards the end. Okay, molto marcato in clarinets, playing harmony with your flutes and then piccolo tracking at the octave above, and then so this was just a little the line was just a little confusing in the way that this was scored. It didn't really quite convince me the way the other parts did, right? Because you're starting off with this nice octave right in here, and then you lose the inner voice, right? When you jump up to that upper to double with the piccolo. Also, something that's sort of missing from a lot of these wind parts and brass parts is the notion of how many people are playing any particular line. So you left that out, right? So I assume that you want two players here, so you would write A2, A2, right? And then, maybe you wanted just like a single, maybe just one single flute player right here, so you would write one period, right? Same thing, like maybe you just wanted a single clarinet player right in here, so one period. Now, I'm not so convinced. I mean, this is great. So this sort of has me conflicted, because it's a great use of harp, right? This is a big tutti section, obviously, and it doesn't really lend itself to playing, to effective harp scoring for more than just like glissandos and big rolls and stuff. Okay, so at least the way that it is being orchestrated so far. So here you kind of get around that problem. We've got some forte wind scoring, but the harp has got a chance because there's nothing really getting in its way except for this big chord right here. So two little things about this. Okay, one is the upward arrow roll. You do not need that. Okay, so like the default roll is upwards, right? And that is just the single line roll without any arrows up or down. The problem with using the up arrow roll mark is that you are sort of begging the question of, using the down arrow. So by using this up arrow, you're saying, well, at some point very soon, or possibly within this same phrase, I'm going to have a downward pointing arrow. So watch out for that. This one is up, that next one's going to be down, and so on. So if you are not going to have any downward rolls, do not use the upward roll, okay? Because it's already the default. You are gilding the lily here, okay? Just leave out the arrow. You don't need it. All right. So the thing that is conflicting me is kind of like the way that the harp interacts with with the winds right in here. I mean, it is audible, but I'm not so sure that it works with the parts as well, and especially when you are dropping out here with this middle voice. I feel that it just kind of becomes a bit of a distraction to have the harp moving around inside there. So maybe this is a part that could be developed a little bit more. Okay, just that maybe think it out a little bit more about what you want the harp to do. Maybe the harp shouldn't become so contrapuntal, and it could be more of like a broken chord or some other kind of approach that really supports what's going on in here rather than competes with it. Do you know what I mean? Okay. All right. So, and there's also the reversal of the parts, where this is actually the bass part, the downward fall from B to E. Right. So, and that's kind of upside down. So that's also a problem. There isn't any motion towards the bass. So I would say in this, according to that, it's sort of half the evaluation criteria. Yes, you maintained a driving staccato, but it's not so clear what you're transitioning smoothly into, right? Like we want part A to go into part B. So perhaps, you would have come up with a solution where you, maybe supporting at a different level, and you were doing 2 or 3 sections, right? So you would have had to really put your thinking cap on and worked out how this was going to connect. But look, I don't want to get stuck on that. Let's talk about the some of the other general orchestration stuff that's going on. So yeah, so you've got this. I like that you have the dropout here. You have like rest, byum 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 in your winds, just coming in and supporting or doubling the strings a little late, and then at the same time on the third beat you have the horns pushing into the introduction of the heavy brass. Now, you're starting off first trumpet. Here you're asking for 3 trumpets in C, but you're really only using 2, so you could probably just knock this down to 2 trumpets. So you're scoring that high C cold, right? There's just no, the player is not, they just have to start off on that high note, bam. And, average, pro, top drawer, trumpet player, brass section player is not going to have any problem with that, but it is just going to be a bit of a pain. But you didn't score too many, so it's not so bad. I would say like semi-pro orchestra, you might get a crack, like the first couple notes might crack. And then after that, might sound a little bit better. So, it's not to say that high C is all that hard to do, but it's just, you kind of want to set it up. You know what I mean? Like warm up the player and then go for the high C. It's just a little bit easier unless you're working with like the top people in the world or with or just, a very, very good pro orchestra. But, the rest of the brass scoring is really nice. And I like these octaves right in here in the trombone. That's really, really fun. It's a little bit, like the first beat of this bar is a little barren, right? Because you've got the strings coming in here, nice and strong. And that works because you're following this. And then just have the string start da-da-da-da-dum, and then joined up. That's all works really, really well. But then when they continue on, right, there's a sense of a gap right in here when you are just trading over, right? I don't think that you can just pull that. I think you have to continue on the doubling in the strings. And I think dropping off right here and then coming in on the second beat with the trumpets, we also really feel that gap very heavily. Now this you can just score as measured tremolo, right? So these could all be scored as eighth notes with a slash on the stem, right? You'll see it in other parts of other scores, but yeah, I'll just do it for you here. So changing that to eighth notes and adding a slash, right? So that's just a better way of scoring it, I think. Makes it easier to read. And you can add that in here and so on. Now, right here, you're going to run into this syncopation problem. I think it's not so much that it's hard to play. It's very easy to play. The way that, because it's just a syncopation of an eighth note rather than a 16th, as we saw in the clarinets in the previous evaluation. Okay, so it's playable. The problem is that it's really confusing to the ear. I almost said hella confusing. I was in the generation just a little bit before hella. That was one of the things my brother used to say. Him being a student of Berkeley High School, where that term sort of emerged amongst other Northern California high schools. So it is hella confusing. Okay? And I think that what you need is a punch by the syncopated instruments at the beginning. So you've got one here. So you're going bum, 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 bum. So just do that with your horns and your clarinets, right? Just go da 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 da, right? And then put that in here, and then it won't mess the listener up so much, because like the problem is that these horns are way stronger than what's going on in the winds, because you've elected with your winds not to really, with the strings, because you've elected with your strings in these bars not to join in with supporting what's going on in the winds, right? So what does that mean? The winds are going to be kind of weak. So this insistent bum, 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 bum is going to be half strength. Horns at fortissimo, against forte. Well, we're still forte, well, crescendo. If you really mean fortissimo, you better write it in. But even at that, the horns are going to just be blaring in here, and of course they're going to pick up support from the bassoons and the clarinets. So that is a big, powerful sound in the middle, and it's going to throw off the kind of the predictable rhythm right in here. You can put a bass drum strike right there at the beginning, and it's still not going to make a difference, right? Because it isn't in the same the same kind of timbral picture. Right, and we've got this right in here, right? So you're kind of supporting the horns. I think you should throw that in too, just like throw in a low E, bum 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 bum. I think would just really clarify things rhythmically in there. Okay. So the biggest problem, as I see it, is right in here, and it is just a matter of proportions. Right? You've been screeching along here, You have been shouting along here at fortissimo. You're dropping to forte. You have the piccolo in a fairly weak register. And you are dropping the support down here in the strings to mezzo forte, right? And which means that the winds are going to be coming to the fore here. They're going to be playing way louder than the strings. Because they're already louder than the strings, right? So you're almost doubling their dynamic weight by having the strings be so soft. And it's kind of unclear about how you're approaching this mezzo forte. Is this meant to be a diminuendo, or is it subito, right? And then you've got a marking on a rest, right? So it's a little strange. Maybe you intended that. Anyway. So, yeah, this just did not really convince me so much. I felt that if you had continued doubling the melody with the violins, that could have provided some support. But it's really just a matter of proportion. The scoring in here is so powerful that when you drop down to the flutes, it's really hard for the ear to pick out what's going on right in here. Right, and it doesn't really pick up steam until we get into this very, very firm, emphatic section, and the scoring is really nice, actually, right in here. And I like the trading off to, from trumpets, winds, and strings to just horns and strings, and then lower brass and lower scored strings. I think that all works really great, and these tutti chords are a lot of fun. Right? But then there were some other problems here with this section leading to the end. All right, but to get back to this, it's just really, even though this is the flutes, I'm assuming A2 flutes plus piccolo in a fairly strong register. There just really isn't a lot of support for the melody in there, and the kind of driving force seems to get a little bit hampered, just a little bit hobbled right in there. So I would just say this needs a little bit more work. You need to decide how you're going to set it up so that it really is a convincing push up to here, and it's a nice contrast between these two parts. The idea of the contrast is great, but it could be something just as simple as octaves in the harp playing above it, or maybe adding celesta or xylophone. Not xylophone. Too much xylophone. I meant to say glockenspiel, right? It's some other kind of instrument that brings out the overtones a little bit more. So those are some of the bigger problems that I saw in this, but that does not take away from my enjoyment of your ingenuity and your, just the wonderful, the approach that you had on this. A lot of the thought that you put into some of the scoring in here, I felt was just really nicely done and hugely appreciated, and is really is going to be a nice building block in our ingenuity level, our big fortress of ingenuity that we are building here in both the Patreon supporter entries and the website entries. So thank you so much, Martyn. It's really appreciated, and I'm really happy to have your support on Patreon. It really means a lot, and I cannot wait to jump to the next evaluation and see what wonders that might contain. So thanks everybody, and let's go check out that next score.